In the year 2000, Interactive Imagination published their new collectible card game, Magi-Nation Duel. Throughout the next 2 years, 4 expansion sets were also released, expanding the existing selection of cards and the game's lore. But in between that, Interactive Imagination also developed a video game adaptation to drive up interest in the franchise. Simply titled Magi-Nation, the game was released in March of 2001 for the Game Boy Color, and rather than recreating the rules of the card game, it instead takes the world and characters and builds a turn-based RPG, where you raise creatures and interact with the world directly. The story begins with the protagonist, Tony Jones, moving to a new home. He's looking to make some friends, but the neighbors are assholes. They dare him to go inside a dangerous cavern and bring back a crystal, or else he will be known as Phony Bones for the rest of his miserable life. It turns out that there really is a crystal at the end of the cave, but right after grabbing it, the floor begins to crumble and there's no escape. Run all you want, but it's scripted, so have a nice fall. After falling into the river, Tony finds himself in an unfamiliar place when a pair of weirdos appear. They summon a monster to attack him, but then the crystal summons a bigger monster, and they are forced to retreat. A man then approaches and gives him a dose of nonsense involving exploding sock puppets, skunks playing poker, and dirigible forks. Thankfully, he gives Tony a bracelet that serves as a translator device and introduces himself. This is Adon, a keeper from the village of Narum, and after witnessing that battle, he decides to have Tony meet the village elder, Orwin. You see, that isn't just any crystal, it's raw animite, infused with the power of a dream creature. But it normally has to be processed into a ring for anyone to be able to use it. Somehow, Tony managed to summon a creature without a ring, so Adon believes that he is the great Magus Kairos, a hero prophesied to come save the world in its time of need. But this isn't the first time that Adon claims to have found Kairos, and Orwin isn't interested in entertaining his wacky ideas, so he orders Tony to not leave the village until this all blows over. After having a brand new ring forged for him, Adon immediately takes Tony outside the village, when suddenly there's an earthquake and a strange wave of energy shoots into the sky. Orwin goes to check it out, but that was a bad idea. Oops. Orwin is on his way to the afterlife, and that shadow geyser isn't gonna close itself, so the last resort is to discuss the situation with a crummy old hag on the other side of the forest. After getting trolled on the way to her shack, she brings out an artifact called the Core Glyph. It's supposed to be deadly to the touch, but once again, Tony breaks the mold and casually touches it without a problem. With the glyph's power, he should be able to pass through the geyser's barrier and hopefully find a way to shut it down. But it's never so simple, as geysers are starting to appear all over the world. However, the core glyph has a few slots in it, and curiously, the power sources of the geysers fit them perfectly. The old hag believes that completing the glyph will reveal a way for Tony to go back home. So now his main priority is to find and close the geysers, not just to find a way back home, but also to fulfill his destiny as the hero who will save the Moonlands. And this world is kinda bonkers. Magi-Nation takes place in a land divided into multiple realms, each with its own culture, environment, and dream creatures, which are the monsters that Magi summon to use in combat. You first arrive in Narum, a nation of lush forests and omnipresent greenery. Then you'll visit the Underneath, a community living below ground where everything is mushrooms, followed by the Cold, where the sea is lava and nothing escapes meltdown. After that, you will dive into Warath, populated by magi that built towns on top of giant turtles, while up in the sky lies Arderial, a secluded country where people are born with wings. And finally there is the core, the designated evil zone inhabited by corrupted versions of creatures from other realms. All of this is fairly interesting, but it doesn't describe the full extent of the eccentricity that permeates all of the Moonlands. And Tony really sells how bizarre the world is, since he's just a normal kid thrown into an alternate reality. He's the kind of protagonist whose common sense is opposite to what is considered normal in this world, and the game will often play this angle for comedy as he wonders what the balls did he get himself into. He also has a large chunk of hidden dialogue, with even seemingly generic objects that look identical to many others, typically getting their own unique responses. It's such a horrific mismanagement of the studio's time and money. I love it so much. The game has a good dose of comedy, but it's also paired with the mystery written all over it, and it certainly also knows how to be cruel. In fact, when something darker happens, the contrast with all the weirdness just makes the impact that much bigger. One moment you're wondering what the hell are those haunted cat paintings, then another moment you stumble into a room with no music and one single NPC who mentions a certain group of creatures before permanently disappearing the moment you leave the room. And then you have the very last area of the game, with its droning music, the statues, and some NPCs you met previously just being frozen there with an empty text box like some kind of creepypasta. Intentionally or not, the world depicted in the game is mixed in a very unique manner, not only due to its characters, but also the aesthetics and the music. Character and creature portraits use a monochrome high-contrast style that gives them a very distinctive look, while the music helps set the tone with its droning 8-bit tunes and sharp leads. Some tracks are a bit too harsh, but like the visuals, it generally uses the Game Boy Color's limited capabilities as a way to create something unique, rather than just being a restriction to the artists. By comparison, the artwork from the card game looks rather boring, and doesn't compel me to explore it further. So, to a filthy secondary like me, this game is Magi-Nation, not the card game or whatever this is. But I do respect how a small team of people with a fetish for hiding tacos in their drawings also aspired to develop their own games with a tiny budget and a constrained time schedule. They injected the game with so much personality that it's hard to hate it. The only flaws with the visuals are that battle animations can look overly dark sometimes, and that only some creatures have unique portraits, while others use a cropped version of the battle sprite. They also seem to have somewhat different designs from one another, at least in a few cases. Maybe the designs hadn't been finalized during development, which would also explain why a handful of creatures have different names from the card game. There's even a couple of creatures that are original to the video game and never made an appearance as a card. The world map also looks like a doodle I made on MS Paint, and a few areas just look like a garbled mess, but this was likely due to development hell. Magi-Nation's gameplay is split into two parts. One is your typical exploration. Walk around places, talk to people, watch cutscenes, acquire items and solve puzzles. Most of those are located in the Shadow Geysers, which start very easy but quickly ramp up in difficulty and length. In fact, most late game areas have decently complex layouts, which does make the occasional backtracking a bit of a pain. Though you do get some useful abilities that not only let you cross obstacles, but also let you maneuver through previous areas more quickly. You can swim, you can fly, you can kick hard stuff. Oof, my toes. The second, more juicy part is the adaptation of the card game's characters and creatures into a turn-based RPG. In most areas, Magi-Nation does not have random encounters. Instead, battles are triggered by touching the sparkles that appear on the ground. The exception is in Shadow Geysers, which do have random encounters that can start at any time. Whenever you defeat an enemy creature, there's a chance that you will obtain a sample of its infused Dynamite, and by bringing the necessary amount to a ringsmith, you can forge a ring that will let you summon them in battle. The system itself is built around summoning up to 4 creatures to attack enemies and protect yourself. Each creature in your party has an energy value, which is effectively its maximum HP and the amount of your own energy that you must spend to summon it. This can be done during your own turn, which can also be spent using items and spells or focusing to recover your own energy. All active creatures also get their own individual turn, where they can attack enemies using a basic attack or an ability that expends some of their energy. Keeping at least one creature alive is of utmost importance, because they serve as meat shields, blocking attacks thrown at the player. If they survive the battle, any remaining energy is also refunded. If a creature goes down, you can summon it again, but of course that will take another turn, so if you don't have any others on the field, you are vulnerable to getting smacked, and it's game over if your energy drops to 0. These rules also apply in battles against other Magi, who will summon creatures that must first be defeated before laying the smackdown on their ugly faces. Winning battles will earn experience for both the player and the creatures who participated in battle. Gaining levels simply increases the player's maximum energy, while creatures will increase their stats and potentially learn new abilities at specific levels. Each creature can also equip 2 relics, which are items with special effects, such as increasing stats or protecting against certain attacks. It has a lot of variables, but the battle system isn't complicated. The tricky part is managing your energy, because everything revolves around it. It's your HP, it's your mana, it's your abusive wife. Since high-level creatures require more energy, summoning them without care is effectively crippling yourself. This is particularly true in the last section of the story, where creatures start requiring much larger amounts of energy than they did at the start. Remember that energy is also your HP, so wasting energy puts you in danger as well. And if you ever find yourself unprotected, you will be in a world of pain, regardless of how many recovery items you have. Possibly the biggest issue with combat is that creatures only learn up to 4 moves in total, not up to 4 moves at a time. I mean that their entire moveset only goes up to 4 moves, and that's for the lucky ones. Many only have 3 moves, and some even get stuck with just 2. The levels at which creatures learn them is also far from each other, so combat can become very repetitive. For example, Quirks starts with Scratch, then learns Maul at level 15, then Impale at level 35, and then Flock at level 50. So you'll spend half of the game just spamming Maul in every battle. There's also a very clear power gap between creatures, with some being absolute powerhouses, while others are borderline useless. It's kind of funny how the Quirk you start with is so good that it carries you through the entire game, leading players to dump their best relics and stat boosting items on it, while not bothering to experiment with other creatures. It even learns Impale, which can directly target enemy Magi and cockblock their attempts at summoning more creatures. To make matters worse, the game employs some sort of XP scaling formula that reduces the experience gained from battles down to basically nothing if the creatures are either too high level or too low level, so neglecting your creatures can result in them being horribly crippled unless you go out of your way to backtrack to previous areas to grind for levels. To be fair, the rings you forge at later parts of the game do come at higher levels, and it's not a hard game, so you don't really need to grind at any point. It's just that the way the game is balanced does nothing to incentivize the player to not walk the path of least resistance. That goes for magic spells too, because half of them are easy to miss, yet all of them are entirely useless beyond the first few hours. Even the spells you find in the endgame spend considerable amounts of energy for pathetic amounts of damage. Magic doesn't scale as you gain levels, so early game spells like Leaf Cut will never grow any stronger, effectively making them useless. It's the same with the Focus action, which will only restore single-digit amounts of energy regardless of your level. Some of these problems were likely born from the team's lack of experience and the game's rushed development. It's no exaggeration to say that this game needed another half year in the oven, because boy does it have some rough edges. Certain areas look like a garbled mess of pixels. There are visual glitches at the edges of the screen. A few things seem to lack proper sound effects, and simply moving around the clouds of Ardariel almost feels like you're breaking something. Oh, and you can get soft-locked during the final geyser by running out of the star keys necessary to open the doors. Battles are slow due to the text speed, and I wonder if this is just an optimization issue, since a few text elements are drawn one by one. There's also a number of oversights that render a handful of events inaccessible, including a secret dream creature being unobtainable if you complete a certain side quest first. A couple of other creatures are completely unobtainable without cheat codes, since you need their animite to forge the rings, but they aren't programmed to appear anywhere. Of note is the Ardariel Hirons, two specimens from a group of rare but very powerful creatures. But I guess that not all is lost, because the game got a remake on the Game Boy Advance, and you might be wondering, who the hell is this guy? Basically, Magi-Nation had a short-lived existence in Japan when the card game got a release over there, and together with it came a manga adaptation featuring a new protagonist, Dan Monma. Presumably, this change was made to appeal to younger fans of shonen manga, which commonly feature an energetic young kid with spiky anime hair as the protagonist. So when the game was remade by Japanese studio Epic, Tony was replaced by Dan to match the manga. That said, there are some pre-release screenshots that show Tony as the protagonist, alongside a combat screen that is almost identical to the old one. And the original game's script is present in the game's data. It's possible that there were plans to release this remake outside of Japan, and potentially with Tony as the protagonist. Who knows? There's very little information about the remake out there, but I am pretty sure that it was developed under a tight budget, and ended up selling very poorly, killing any hope of an overseas release. Anyway, the remake itself isn't terribly interesting to talk about, since it's practically the same game with different visuals. The story is the exact same, just translated to Japanese, and with Dan moving to Yokohara town instead of Tavel Gorge. Actually, replacing Tony with Dan kind of misses the point. Tony looks like a normal kid because he is a normal kid, a stranger in the wacky world of the Moonlands. Meanwhile, Dan has that spunky anime hair and those exaggerated expressions that don't invoke the same normal kid vibes. Unlike Tony, his design doesn't fit in with the kids from his town. The main appeal of the remake is the quality of life improvements. The result is that combat is significantly faster, and every creature is obtainable without hacking the game. However, a few creatures were also replaced with different ones. A good portion of those were creatures that didn't exist in the card game, but a couple of others were simply replaced for no apparent reason. A select few late game bosses also had their rosters updated with more powerful creatures. Besides that, Shadow Geysers now have sparkles instead of random encounters, and the battle screen now shows the HP of enemy creatures. I believe that the XP scaling has also been modified, as keeping multiple creatures up in levels seems to be a lot easier. Overall, it plays more smoothly, and various bugs and oversights were fixed, which is great. But in exchange for those improvements, the original game's unique atmosphere and art style has been completely butchered. To its credit, the extra colors allowed by the new hardware provides a more accurate representation of each creature, and it avoids the overly dark palettes and the inconsistencies between sprites. The character art follows the same story. They are more accurate to the card game's artwork, and far easier to interpret than the sometimes messy portraits of the original game. But it was those same palettes and designs that gave Magi-Nation its unique look, and the remake's technical quality looks downright amateurish. The environments use very drab colors for everything, and the characters fail to stand out from the backgrounds, resulting in all the visual coherence of a sewage drain. Again, this remake was probably done on the cheapo, but even then I'm sure it could be better. Magi-Nation at least looked fine on the Game Boy Color, but this looks straight up bad by the Game Boy Advance's standards. And given how certain elements are extremely close to the original, I'm almost certain that a lot of the original code and assets was simply copy-pasted and painted over. The music didn't escape the butchering either, with several tracks missing and certain scenes using different music for seemingly no reason. Only one of the 3 regular battle themes still exists, and the music for the final boss was replaced with a full version of the jingle that plays when you get one of the special items that grant the protagonist a new ability. So yes, it brings quality of life improvements and fixes issues that plagued the original game. But that's all it offers. It's the bare minimum you can expect from a remake, and it doesn't add anything new and interesting. If anything, it does the opposite. To sum it up, pick the remake to play a version that has smoother gameplay but looks and sounds like boiled ass, or pick the original for some annoyances paired with a very cool aesthetic. But regardless of which version you prefer, please do give Magi-Nation a try. Its bizarre world and characters, combined with a flawed but entertaining combat system with really cool monster designs, make it a gem in the Game Boy library. Sadly, none of that really mattered as a commercial product. Being released late in the system's lifetime probably hurt its potential audience, but still there were plans to continue investing in video games. One such plan was Keeper's Quest, a smaller project reusing assets from the main game. It was never released, but the spicy Nintendo leaks from 2020 show that it seems to be in a mostly finished state. However, the name did get used on a game for Palm OS. It's not a port of the lost prototype, but it does share the concept of pitting the player against a series of puzzles. A full-fledged sequel called Magination Invasion was also in pre-production, but the game never actually materialized and not much is known. As for its short-lived trip to Japan, there's very little info, but Famitsu gave the remake a 22 out of 40, and I think it's safe to say that it sold like ass. One random Japanese blog claims that the game was very hard to find because not many copies were produced, and I wouldn't be surprised if that was true. In the meantime, Interactive Imagination had died due to financial difficulties and competitors like Yu-Gi-Oh! Coming to eat their lunch. A company called Cookie Jar then bought the rights to the IP, which resulted in the 2007 reboot, kicking off with an animated cartoon and a free-to-play MMORPG to go with it. Existing fans promptly flipped the bird at it, and really, how could they not? The art style, the redesigned characters, and the altered plot ruined any connection that the diehards had with the franchise. It was Magi-Nation in name only. The cartoon ended up as a flop and was removed from air due to poor ratings, while the game never got much traction and was shut down not much later. Plans for a new collectible card game and a Nintendo DS title also existed, but were unsurprisingly cancelled. The rights to the Magi-Nation IP are currently owned by a company called Wildbrain, who acquired Cookie Jar Entertainment back in 2012. So far, nothing has come out of it, and that likely won't change anytime soon. Even so, not everything is lost. A small community collecting and playing the card game is still out there, and some of the Interactive Imagination staff occasionally keeps in touch with it, even if they have since found their calling in life, to varying degrees of success. Philip Taffel, one of the founders, has apparently moved up in life and became a politician aiming to become Seattle's mayor. And Rich Werner, who started his career with Magi-Nation, went on to create the art for many casual games, and eventually got his big claim to fame with Plants vs. Zombies. Yeah, bet you didn't expect that. All it takes is a little imagination.